This is the standard 5.3 video notes. In the past unit, we looked at how the United States became a world power through the Spanish-American War. In this unit, we're going to look at the specific foreign policies in a different region of the world during this period of imperialism. We're going to look at the open door policy along with the building of the Panama Canal, and then we're going to look at Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy along with Taft's dollar diplomacy and Wilson's moral diplomacy as different foreign policies and how we interacted with the rest of the world. So to start with, let's review a little bit about westward expansion. We'd kind of always been a little imperialist in forms of westward expansion. This is a little bit different because we're actually going around the world as opposed to just on the continent. If you remember back to George Washington's farewell address, he actually stressed that we should stay isolationist so that we didn't get caught up in what was going on around the world. However, the fact that we needed new markets to sell our goods changed that policy from isolationism to imperialism. Although it didn't change it as much as you would think because we'd always really been about expanding the size of the country, but we just kind of ran out of land, so now we have to go across the oceans to do that. As a result, the U.S. became a lot more assertive in both China and Latin America. So let's start with China. The U.S. involvement in China. At first, Europe, the other European countries had kind of taken China as their own, and they all had different spheres of influence, as you can see by the map, where each country controlled a little part of China. Well, the U.S. did not have a spear, and so since the U.S. didn't have that spear, we want to be able to be allowed into China, and so we passed what's called the open door policy, where we said that China should be an open door so that we can trade in other countries' spheres of influence, even though we weren't there originally, we didn't have our own spear. This only works because of the British being involved. The Chinese, they really don't like us being there, though, and they actually started a rebellion called the Boxer Rebellion. These were some Chinese nationalists called Boxers. They didn't like the fact that all these foreign countries were in China telling them what to do and selling them goods and forcing them to act like those other countries. And we actually, as the United States, we took a leading role in putting down that Boxer Rebellion. And you can see that picture of the side is kind of shocking, but that's how the Chinese that went along with us put down the rebellion. That's how forcefully they did it, and the executions were they chopped their heads off. So as you can obviously see, the open door notes were not meant to help China. It's really meant to help us sell goods to all the people that were in China. Moving to Latin America. The U.S. had been involved in Latin America for a while, since the Spanish-American War. One of the ways that we got involved in was the Platt Amendment in Cuba, which said basically that the U.S. could intervene whenever necessary in Cuba and allowed the U.S. to establish a permanent base in Guantanamo Bay, which we still have to this day. The Platt Amendment was written into the Cuban Constitution, where we basically forced Cuba to say that we could get involved in Cuba whenever we wanted. Whenever we thought that they weren't doing something that we liked, we could go get involved immediately. And this really has a lot to do with the fact that we need their resources and their sugar. We also got involved in Latin America through the Panama Canal. We'd wanted to build a canal through Latin America to help our trade for a long time, so we didn't have to go around all the way around South America. So there was a good area in Panama called the Isthmus of Panama in which we could build a canal across, but it was owned by Colombia. Colombia wouldn't sell that area to the U.S., so the U.S. ended up sending gunboats to assist the revolution in Panama. The U.S. started a revolution in Panama and sent gunboats down and basically threatened Colombia that if they messed with the revolution, then we would step in and stop it. As a result, the U.S. leased the land to build the canal in Panama and had it all, I think up until 1998 they had that land. And it's a major undertaking building that canal. In fact, there's a really good quote by Theodore Roosevelt right there that says, "I took the canal zone and let Congress debate." That kind of shows you a lot about Theodore Roosevelt and his personality. So let's talk about Theodore Roosevelt a little bit. His foreign policy was sometimes called big stick diplomacy. He also had what was called the Roosevelt Corollary, or addition to the Monroe Doctrine. And if you remember back to the Monroe Doctrine, it said that Europe should stay out of Latin American affairs so that the U.S. could be involved. And so what it did was it described the role of the United States as a policeman that would keep European powers from intervening in the Western hemispheres. So if a Latin American country owed a European country money, then the U.S. would collect that money and then give it to the European country for them, so the U.S. would have the major role in Latin America. His foreign policy was called big stick diplomacy, and it comes from a proverb proverb, speak softly, but carry a big stick. And in our case, that big stick would have been the Navy. And through that policy, the United States intervened in several Central American countries, taking over their customs houses and collecting to pay taxes, to pay trade debts owed to European nations, to prevent the Europeans from using military power to collect those debts. We wanted to show that we were the power in this hemisphere. Roosevelt also sent the Great White Fleet on a tour around the world to show that show America's naval power and that the U.S. finally had a navy that other countries should be scared of. The next major president's policy that we'll talk about is William Howard Taft. His policy was called dollar diplomacy, and it really means a lot like it says. And this was a promise by Taft that he would protect the investments of American businesses in Latin America with a guarantee of the United States intervention if any problems arose. That's going to really increase American investment and control of Latin America. So if you have an American business owner who has, say, a pineapple farm in Latin America, and that government starts to act unfriendly towards that Latin American pineapple farm, then the U.S. would then send in a military to overthrow that Latin American government so that that pineapple farm could grow and be profitable. The next president we want to look at is Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson's foreign policy was called moral diplomacy, and it's kind of a lot like it sounds too. He wants to intervene in Mexico so that he can teach the Mexicans to elect good men while also supporting the economic interests of American businessmen in the Western Hemisphere. It sounds like it's really, really nice and that we're going to help them elect good leaders, but in reality, he's doing it because he wants to control that country so that our interests can be protected, the United States interests can be protected. In conclusion, each president's policy really involved the United States more deeply in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere, angered the neighbors of the United States, and is going to increase the American role in world affairs. Really move from isolationism to world involvement very quickly during the early 1900s, and that's what imperialism is all about. If you haven't already, please turn in the notes guide and also take the video quiz. Thank you.